David Albury stood at the bedroom window, watching his wife Jessica walk toward her car. That smile, the same mysterious smile she wore every single morning before leaving for work. It wasn't the smile she gave him at breakfast. It wasn't the smile from their wedding photos. This was different, secretive, almost glowing. And today, after 6 months of watching it, David decided he needed to know why. Jessica's car disappeared around the corner. David grabbed his keys. His hands were shaking. "What am I doing?" he whispered to himself, but he was already out the door. Before we continue with David's discovery, if you believe in true love, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. We'd also love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. Now, let's see what David finds out. 6 months earlier, everything had been normal. David worked as an accountant at Morrison & Associates downtown. Jessica was a nurse at St. Catherine's Hospital, or so he thought. They had been married for 8 years, good years mostly. They owned a modest home in the suburbs, took vacations twice a year, and talked about starting a family soon. But something changed after Jessica started her new position at the hospital. "I'm moving to a different unit," she had announced one evening over dinner. "The hours are better, but I'll be leaving earlier in the mornings." "That's great," David had said, genuinely happy for her. "Which unit?" "Pediatrics," Jessica answered quickly. "More rewarding work." David had noticed small changes after that. Jessica started dressing differently. Not provocatively, but more carefully. She bought new perfume. She hummed while getting ready each morning. And then there was the smile. Every morning, just before walking out the door, Jessica would pause, take a deep breath, and smile that strange, private smile. At first, David thought nothing of it. People smiled. His wife was happy at work. What was wrong with that? But the smile haunted him. It appeared in his thoughts during meetings. He saw it when he closed his eyes at night. That smile didn't belong to him anymore. 3 months ago, David had asked her about it. "You seem really happy these days," he said casually over breakfast. "I am," Jessica replied, that same smile flickering across her face. "The new unit is wonderful. I feel like I'm making a real difference." "That's all it is? Just work?" Jessica had looked at him strangely. What else would it be? David had let it drop. But the questions kept growing. Why did she leave 30 minutes earlier than necessary? Why had she password protected her phone? Why did she sometimes come home smelling like cologne that wasn't his? His best friend Marco had noticed David's distraction during their weekly basketball game. "You're somewhere else today," Marco said, passing him the ball. "What's going on?" David missed the shot completely. "It's Jessica." "What about her?" "I think she might be..." David couldn't finish the sentence. Marco grabbed his shoulder. "Having an affair?" The words hung in the air like smoke. "I don't know," David admitted. "Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm paranoid. But something's different." "Have you checked her phone? Her car?" "I'm not that guy," David said firmly. "I trust my wife." "But do you?" Marco asked quietly. That question kept David awake that night. Jessica slept peacefully beside him, but David stared at the ceiling until dawn. The next morning, he watched her get ready with new eyes. Every movement seemed suspicious. The way she checked her reflection 3 times. The way she applied lipstick more carefully than usual. The way she practically floated down the stairs. And then at the door she paused, took that breath, smiled that smile. "Have a good day," David called from the kitchen. "You too, honey," Jessica replied, but her mind was already elsewhere. David waited until her car was gone. Then he called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Now, following her car from a distance, David's heart pounded in his chest. He kept 2 cars between them, feeling ridiculous and desperate at the same time. Jessica's car didn't turn toward St. Catherine's Hospital. Instead, she headed downtown, toward the financial district where David worked. Maybe she's running an errand, David told himself. But she drove with purpose, no hesitation at stop signs or intersections. Finally, Jessica pulled into a parking garage. David waited a moment before following. He parked 3 levels above her and rushed to the elevator, hoping to catch sight of where she went. The elevator doors opened to the lobby of the Pinnacle Tower, one of the most expensive office buildings in the city. David scanned the crowd but couldn't see Jessica. Then he spotted her. She was walking toward the express elevators, the ones that only went to the penthouse floors. She pressed the button and waited, checking her reflection in the polished elevator doors. David hid behind a marble column, watching. His mouth was dry, his hands were cold. The elevator arrived. Jessica stepped in. Just before the doors closed, David saw it again, that smile. Radiant, secret, full of something he couldn't name. The elevator indicator showed her floor, 47. David approached the security desk, trying to look casual. "Excuse me," he said to the guard. "What companies are on the 47th floor?" The guard checked his computer. "Just one, sir. Hoffman Enterprises. Executive offices." "I see. Thank you." David walked back outside, his mind racing. Hoffman Enterprises. Why was that familiar? He pulled out his phone and searched. Hoffman Enterprises was a massive investment firm. The CEO, Richard Hoffman, was a billionaire. David had read about him in business magazines. Young, successful, handsome. The photos showed a man in his late 30s with perfect teeth and expensive suits. In every picture, he radiated confidence and wealth. David felt sick. His wife, leaving home every morning with that secret smile, wasn't going to any hospital. She was going to see Richard Hoffman. He sat in his car for 20 minutes, trying to process this information. Should he confront her? Should he wait and gather more evidence? Should he call a lawyer? David's phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. "Hope you're feeling better. Love you." The words felt like lies now. David started his car and drove aimlessly through the city. His marriage, his life, everything he thought he knew, all of it suddenly felt like an illusion. He ended up at Marco's apartment, pounding on the door until his friend answered in sweatpants and a confused expression. "David, what happened?" "I followed her," David said, walking past Marco into the apartment. "I followed Jessica." Marco closed the door. "And?" "She's not going to any hospital. She's going to Hoffman Enterprises, the investment firm, the one owned by Richard Hoffman, the billionaire." Marco whistled low. "That's specific." "I saw her go up to the executive floor. She smiled right before the elevator doors closed. That same smile, Marco. Like she couldn't wait to get up there." "Did you see her with this Hoffman guy?" "No, I couldn't get past security." Marco handed him a beer. "Look, maybe there's an explanation. Maybe the hospital contracts with them for something. Maybe she's doing medical consulting." At 7 in the morning, every single day, for 6 months, Marco had no answer for that. David drank his beer in silence. Finally, he said, "I need to know what she's doing up there." "How are you going to find out?" "I don't know yet, but I can't just pretend everything is normal." That evening, David arrived home before Jessica. He cooked dinner like always, set the table like always, turned on the evening news like always. But nothing felt normal anymore. Jessica came through the door at 6:15, right on schedule. "Honey, I'm home." She looked radiant. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright. She practically glowed with happiness. "How was your day?" David asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Wonderful," Jessica said, kissing his cheek. "Just wonderful. This new unit is exactly what I needed." The lie came so easily to her. They ate dinner making small talk. Jessica described patients she'd supposedly helped, detailed stories that might have been true or completely fabricated. David couldn't tell anymore. "And how was your day?" Jessica asked. "Feeling better?" "Much better," David lied, matching her deception. "Just needed some rest." After dinner, Jessica settled on the couch with her laptop. David noticed she angled the screen away from him slightly, something she'd never done before. "I'm going to take a shower," David announced. "Okay, honey." In the bathroom, David stood under the hot water and let the tears come. His wife was lying to him. Every morning, every evening, every casual conversation, all of it was built on deception. But why? What was she doing at Hoffman Enterprises? Was she having an affair with Richard Hoffman himself? With someone who worked there? David made a decision. Tomorrow, he would call in sick again. Tomorrow, he would find a way past that security desk. Tomorrow, he would discover the truth, no matter what it cost him. He dried off and returned to the living room. Jessica was still on her laptop, smiling at whatever she was reading. "What you looking at?" David asked casually. Jessica closed the laptop quickly. "Just some medical journals, pretty boring stuff." Another lie. They went to bed at 11. Jessica fell asleep almost immediately, her face peaceful in the moonlight streaming through the window. David lay awake beside her, looking at this woman he thought he knew. After 8 years of marriage, she had become a stranger. He thought about their wedding day. Jessica in her white dress, tears streaming down her face as she said her vows. "I promise to be honest with you, always," she had said. Where had that woman gone? At 3 in the morning, David finally fell into restless sleep. He dreamed of elevators that never stopped climbing, of doors that wouldn't open, of his wife's face transforming into that of a stranger. The alarm woke him at 6. Jessica was already up, humming in the shower. David listened to her cheerful sounds and felt completely alone. At breakfast, Jessica ate quickly, checking her watch 3 times. "Big day?" David asked. "Every day is big in pediatrics," Jessica said, smiling. "So many little lives depending on us." The lies were becoming unbearable. Jessica grabbed her purse and keys. David watched her walk to the door, knowing what came next. She paused, took that breath, smiled that smile. "I love you," David said, his voice breaking slightly. Jessica turned, surprised by the emotion in his voice. For just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Guilt, sadness, but then it was gone. "I love you too," she said softly. Then she was out the door. David counted to 60, then grabbed his keys. Today, he would learn the truth. Today, everything would change. David followed Jessica's car again, maintaining the same careful distance. His stomach churned with anxiety and dread. Whatever he was about to discover would either save his marriage or destroy it completely. Jessica pulled into the same parking garage. David waited 3 minutes before following, parking in almost the same spot as yesterday. This time, he had a plan. At a coffee shop across from Pinnacle Tower, David bought 2 large coffees and a box of donuts. He approached the security desk with his most confident smile. "Morning," David said to the guard, a different one from yesterday. "Delivery for the 47th floor." The guard, an older man with gray hair and tired eyes, looked at the coffee and donuts. "We don't usually allow food deliveries." David leaned in conspiratorially. "Look, it's my first day. My boss will kill me if I mess this up. Please?" The guard sighed. "Fine. Sign in here. I'll need your ID." David's hand froze. He hadn't thought this through. "Actually," David said quickly, "I left my wallet in the car. Let me go grab it." "Can't let you up without ID, buddy." David nodded and walked away, cursing himself. He sat on a bench outside the building, watching the entrance. Employees streamed in, most barely glancing at the security desk. Some swiped badges, others signed in casually. Then David noticed something. A cleaning crew entered through a side entrance, pushing large carts. They didn't stop at security. David circled the building. The side entrance was propped open with a rubber doorstop. A woman in cleaning uniform was unloading supplies from a van. "Need help?" David asked. She looked at him, surprised. "You work here?" "Starting today, actually. Just thought I'd offer." She smiled. "Sweet of you. Can you grab that box?" David carried the box inside, following her through a service corridor. She led him to a freight elevator. "You can just leave it here," she said. "Thanks for the help." "No problem." The woman got off on the 3rd floor. David pressed 47. His heart hammered as the elevator climbed. The digital numbers seemed to move in slow motion. 23, 35, 41. The doors opened onto a stunning reception area. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Modern art hung on white walls. Everything screamed money and power. A receptionist sat behind a glass desk. She looked up as David stepped out, her expression immediately suspicious. Can I help you? David's mind went blank. I'm looking for someone. Do you have an appointment? No, Then I'm afraid you'll need to leave. This is a private floor. David's phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. Missing you today. Can't wait to come home tonight. The words felt like acid. Sir, you need to leave now or I'll call security. David took a step back toward the elevator. As the doors closed, he caught a glimpse of a hallway to the left. And standing at the end of that hallway, visible for just a split second, was Jessica. She was talking to someone out of view, laughing, touching her hair the way she used to touch it when they first started dating. The elevator doors closed. David stood frozen, his reflection staring back at him in the polished metal. When the elevator reached the lobby, David walked out in a daze. He made it to his car before the emotions hit. Anger, betrayal, confusion, all of it crashed over him at once. His phone rang. Marco. Well? Marco asked. Did you find anything? I saw her. She's definitely up there. Doing what? I don't know. I got kicked out before I could find out. Maybe it's time to just ask her, David. And say what? Hey, honey, I've been following you and I know you're lying about where you work. That'll go well. Marco was quiet for a moment. Look, I know a guy. Private investigator. Very discreet. I'm not hiring a private investigator to spy on my wife. You're already spying on your wife. At least a professional could get you real answers. David ended the call without responding. He drove home, his mind spinning with possibilities. Each scenario was worse than the last. That evening, David tried to act normal. Jessica came home glowing again, full of stories about her day. David listened, counting the lies. She mentioned patients by name, described procedures in medical detail. Either she was the world's best liar or... Jessica! David interrupted her mid-sentence. Can I ask you something? She looked at him, confused by his tone. Of course. Are you happy? With us, I mean. With our marriage. Jessica's expression softened. Oh, honey, of course I am. Why would you ask that? You just seem different lately. Distant. I'm not distant, Jessica said, reaching for his hand. I'm right here. I've always been right here. But she wasn't. David could see it in her eyes. Part of her was somewhere else, with someone else, doing something she couldn't share with him. That night, after Jessica fell asleep, David carefully lifted her phone from the nightstand. His hands shook as he tried to unlock it. Password protected. He tried their anniversary. Wrong. Her birthday. Wrong. His birthday. Wrong. After 3 attempts, the phone locked him out completely. David set it back down, feeling ashamed but also more suspicious. What was she hiding? The next morning, David made another decision. He called in sick again. His boss was starting to ask questions, and drove downtown early. This time, he positioned himself in a coffee shop directly across from Pinnacle Tower, with a clear view of the entrance. At 6:52, Jessica's car pulled up. She stepped out wearing a navy blue dress David had never seen before. She entered the building. David watched through the window. She walked straight past security, she must have a badge, and went to the express elevators. David sat there all morning, drinking coffee and pretending to work on his laptop. Several times he considered just walking away, going home, trying to trust his wife. But he couldn't, not until he knew. At 11:30, movement in the building's lobby caught his attention. Jessica was coming out, but she wasn't alone. Walking beside her was a tall man in an expensive suit. Even from across the street, David could see the confident way he moved, the way he commanded space. Richard Hoffman. David recognized him from the photos. They weren't touching, but the way they walked together, the way Jessica tilted her head when he spoke, the way he leaned in to hear her, it all spoke of intimacy. David's coffee cup shattered in his grip. Hot liquid spilled across the table. Sir, are you okay? A barista rushed over with napkins. I'm fine, David said, his voice hollow. Through the window, he watched his wife and Richard Hoffman walk to a black town car. The driver opened the door for them. They climbed in together. The car drove away. David sat motionless, napkins soaked with coffee, his worst fears confirmed. His wife was having an affair with one of the richest men in the city. He pulled out his phone and called Marco. "Give me that investigator's number," David said. 2 days later, David met with the private investigator in a small office that smelled like cigarettes and failure. The man's name was Frank Sullivan, and he had the world-weary eyes of someone who had seen too many marriages fall apart. "What exactly do you want to know?" Frank asked, pen poised over a notepad. "Everything," David said. "Where she goes, who she meets, what she's doing." "This will cost you." "I don't care." Frank nodded slowly. "In my experience, Mr. Albury, most people who hire me already know the truth. They just need proof." "Then get me proof." For the next week, David lived in a strange limbo. He went to work, came home, pretended everything was normal. Jessica continued her routine, leaving each morning with that smile, coming home each evening with stories about her fake hospital job. The lies were destroying David from the inside. Finally, Frank called. "I've got something. Can you meet me tomorrow morning?" David met Frank at a diner on the edge of town. The investigator slid a manila envelope across the table. "Photographs," Frank said, "taken over the past week." David's hands shook as he opened the envelope. The first photo showed Jessica entering Pinnacle Tower. The second showed her at a desk in what looked like a private office. The third showed her and Richard Hoffman in what appeared to be a meeting, papers spread between them. But it was the fourth photo that stopped David's heart. Jessica and Richard were standing close together in what looked like a break room. Richard's hand was on Jessica's shoulder. She was looking up at him, smiling. That smile. The same one she gave before leaving home each morning. "There's more," Frank said quietly. "Your wife has been working at Hoffman Enterprises for 6 months, but she's not having an affair with Richard Hoffman." David looked up, confused. "What?" "Richard Hoffman is gay, Mr. Albury. Happily married to his husband for 5 years. Very private about it, but it's not a secret in their circles." The relief David felt was immediately replaced by more confusion. "Then what is she doing there?" Frank pulled out another document. "This is where it gets interesting. Your wife isn't just working there. According to my sources, she's heading up a major charitable initiative, the Hoffman Foundation's new children's health program." David stared at the investigator. "What?" "Apparently, your wife approached Richard Hoffman 6 months ago with a proposal. She wanted to create a program that would provide free medical care to underprivileged children. Hoffman was so impressed, he hired her on the spot to run it." David felt like the ground was shifting under his feet. "But she told me she was working at the hospital." "According to what I found, she still is. She works at the hospital 3 days a week. The other 2 days, she's at Hoffman Enterprises, coordinating the foundation work." "Why wouldn't she tell me this?" Frank shrugged. "That I can't answer. But I can tell you this. Your wife isn't having an affair. She's running a multi-million-dollar charitable program that's already helped hundreds of kids." David sat back, his mind reeling. Relief, confusion, anger, pride, all of it swirled together until he couldn't separate one emotion from another. "Are you sure?" David asked. "Are you absolutely sure?" Frank nodded. "I've got bank statements, employment records, emails. Your wife is exactly who she says she is, a nurse. She's just also a lot more than that now." David paid Frank and sat in his car for an hour, processing this information. Jessica wasn't cheating. She wasn't lying, exactly. She was just... Actually, she was lying. Maybe not about having an affair, but about where she spent her time, what she did, who she worked with. Why? That evening, David decided to confront her. He couldn't live with this half-truth anymore. Jessica came home at her usual time, radiant as always. "Honey, I'm home." "Jessica," David said from the living room, "we need to talk." She walked in, her smile fading at his serious tone. "Is everything okay? I need you to tell me the truth. Where do you really work?" Jessica's face went pale. "I work at St. Catherine's, you know that." "Try again." She sat down slowly on the couch, her hands trembling. David, I followed you, Jessica. I know you've been going to Pinnacle Tower. I know you work for Richard Hoffman. Tears filled her eyes. I can explain. Please do, because I've been losing my mind thinking you were having an affair. An affair? Jessica looked horrified. David, no. Never. I would never. Then tell me what's going on. Jessica wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. You're right. I've been working at Hoffman Enterprises, but not for the reason you think. Then help me understand, David said, his voice softer now. Jessica stood and walked to the window, her back to him. When she spoke, her voice was distant, almost dreamlike. Do you remember 3 years ago, when we visited your sister in the children's hospital? David nodded. Emily's daughter, the surgery. I saw something that day, Jessica continued. A mother in the hallway, crying. Her daughter needed a procedure, but they couldn't afford it. Insurance wouldn't cover it. The child was in pain, and there was nothing they could do. I remember, David said quietly. I couldn't stop thinking about that mother, about all the families facing impossible choices, so I started researching. I found that thousands of children in our city alone don't receive the medical care they need because their families can't pay. Jessica turned to face him. I wanted to do something, David. Something more than just treating individual patients. I wanted to change the system. So you went to Richard Hoffman. She nodded. I spent months developing a proposal, a comprehensive program that would identify children in need and provide them with free quality health care. Not charity, but a real, sustainable system. Why Hoffman? Because he has the resources and the connections. His foundation already does incredible work. I thought if I could convince him to fund this program. She smiled slightly. And he said yes. Not just yes, he was excited. He gave me a position, a budget, a team. David processed this slowly. But why didn't you tell me? Jessica's smile faded. Because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of failing, she said quietly. David, this is the biggest thing I've ever done. It's terrifying. What if I couldn't pull it off? What if I messed up and let all those children down? I didn't want you to see me fail. Jessica. And there's more, she interrupted, her voice breaking. I didn't want you to know because I was afraid you'd talk me out of it. You've always been practical, sensible. You would have told me to be realistic, to not take such a big risk. And you would have been right. The smart thing would have been to stay in my comfortable hospital job and not reach for something this big. David stood and walked to her. Is that really what you think of me? That I'd crush your dreams? No, Jessica said, tears flowing freely now. I think you love me and want to protect me, but I needed to protect this dream, even from your protection. They stood in silence for a moment. David's anger had evaporated, replaced by hurt and understanding in equal measure. Tell me about the program, he said finally. Jessica's face lit up despite her tears. She grabbed her laptop and opened it, no longer hiding the screen from him. It's called Bright Futures, she explained, showing him documents and photos. We've already helped 347 children. This little girl, Emma, needed heart surgery. Her family was facing bankruptcy. Now she's healthy, and her parents' finances are intact. David scrolled through the photos. Children smiling, families relieved, thank you letters from parents. This boy, Marcus, had leukemia. His treatment would have cost his family everything. Now he's in remission, and his family is stable. Jessica, this is incredible. We're partnering with hospitals, pharmaceutical companies, insurance providers. We're not just paying bills. We're reforming how pediatric healthcare is delivered to low-income families. David looked at his wife with new eyes. Why Tuesdays and Thursdays? Why those specific days? Those are the days I'm at Hoffman Enterprises. The other 3 days I'm still at the hospital. I couldn't give up patient care completely. It grounds me, reminds me why this matters. And the smile? David asked. That smile you give every morning before you leave? Jessica laughed through her tears. You notice that? How could I not? I smile because I'm grateful, she said. Every morning, I can't believe this is my life, that I get to do this work, that I have a chance to make a real difference. The smile is me reminding myself how lucky I am. David pulled her into his arms. I'm sorry I doubted you. I'm sorry I lied, Jessica said against his chest, even if it was a lie of omission. They held each other for a long moment. Then David pulled back slightly. I have a confession too, he said. What? I hired a private investigator. Jessica's eyes widened. You what? I thought you were having an affair. I was desperate. Despite everything, Jessica laughed. With Richard Hoffman? David, he's gay. I know that now. Did your investigator tell you that before or after you paid him? After, David admitted sheepishly. They both started laughing, the tension of the past months finally breaking. We're a mess, Jessica said. Yeah, David agreed. But we're our mess. Jessica grew serious again. David, I want you to be part of this. I should have included you from the beginning. Will you help me? Help you how? You're an accountant. Bright Futures handles millions of dollars. I need someone I can trust completely to manage the finances. Someone who shares my vision and won't let it be corrupted by bureaucracy or greed. David thought about his job at Morrison & Associates. Safe, predictable, boring. Then he looked at the laptop screen, at all those children's faces. What about my job? Talk to Richard. He'll match your salary, probably beat it. Plus, you'll actually be doing work that matters. Jessica, I don't know anything about charitable foundations. You know numbers, you know integrity. That's what we need most. David thought about Marco's words from weeks ago. Do you trust your wife? He looked at Jessica, this woman he'd built a life with, who had dreams bigger than he'd imagined, who had been brave enough to pursue them despite her fear. Yes, David said, I'll help you. 2 weeks later, David walked into Hoffman Enterprises as an official employee. Richard Hoffman himself met him in the lobby. Mr. Albury, Richard said, extending his hand. Your wife speaks very highly of you. Welcome to the team. Thank you for the opportunity. Richard led him to the 47th floor, where Jessica was waiting in a conference room. The walls were covered with charts, graphs, and photos of children. This is our war room, Jessica explained. Every child on that wall represents someone we're helping or planning to help. David walked along the wall, reading names and stories. Each one was a life changed. Your job, Richard said, is to make sure we can sustain this indefinitely. Jessica's vision is brilliant, but visions need solid financial foundations. David rolled up his sleeves. Show me the books. For the next 3 months, David immersed himself in Bright Futures. He discovered inefficiencies in their spending, found ways to stretch their budget further, and developed new funding streams they hadn't considered. Working alongside Jessica was a revelation. He saw her in meetings, commanding respect from doctors and executives. He watched her negotiate with pharmaceutical companies, refusing to compromise on quality care. He witnessed her comfort a scared child in the hospital, then pivot to reviewing financial reports. This was his wife, strong, compassionate, brilliant. How had he not seen it before? One evening they worked late at the office. Everyone else had gone home. They sat across from each other, laptops open, but both too tired to focus anymore. David, Jessica said. Thank you. For what? For not giving up on us. For being willing to understand instead of just being angry. David closed his laptop. I almost did give up. When I thought you were having an affair, I was ready to call a lawyer. I should have trusted you from the beginning, Jessica said. I thought I was protecting my dream, but I was really just protecting my ego. And I should have noticed that my wife was doing something extraordinary, David replied. I was so caught up in routine that I stopped seeing you. Jessica stood and walked around the desk. She sat on the edge, facing him. We almost lost each other, she said, but we didn't. No, she agreed. We didn't. David thought about that smile, the one that had haunted him for months. Now he understood it. It wasn't a secret smile. It was a grateful smile. A smile that said, I get to do meaningful work. I get to help people. I get to make a difference. I love you, David said. I love you too. 6 months passed. Bright Futures expanded from helping hundreds of children to helping thousands. David's financial restructuring allowed them to triple their impact while actually reducing costs. The program gained national attention. News outlets featured their success stories. Other cities reached out, asking how they could replicate the model. One morning, David was reviewing quarterly reports when Jessica burst into his office. "You need to see this," she said, pulling up a video on her phone. It was a news segment. A reporter stood outside a hospital interviewing a mother holding a small boy. "This is Tyler," the mother said, tears streaming down her face. "6 months ago, doctors told us he needed surgery we couldn't afford. We were going to lose our house to pay for it. Then Bright Futures found us." The video cut to Tyler playing soccer, healthy and happy. "They saved my son's life," the mother continued, "and they saved our family's future. I don't know how to thank them." Jessica wiped her eyes. "That's why I do this. That's why I smile every morning." David pulled her close. "I'm proud of you. I should have said that months ago, but I'm saying it now. I'm so proud of you." That evening they drove home together, something they'd started doing since David joined Bright Futures. As they pulled into their driveway, Jessica paused. "What?" David asked. "I'm just happy," she said. "Really, truly happy. I have work I love. I'm helping people. And I have you beside me through all of it." "No more secrets?" David asked. "No more secrets," Jessica promised. "From now on, we share everything. The dreams, the fears, the successes, the failures, all of it." They walked into their house hand in hand. The place looked different to David now. Not because anything had changed physically, but because he saw it through new eyes. This was the home of two people doing meaningful work together. Two people who had almost lost each other but found their way back. Two people who were stronger together than apart. The next morning, David watched Jessica get ready for work. She checked her reflection, grabbed her keys, and walked to the door. Then she paused, took that breath, and smiled. But this time, David smiled too, because he finally understood. 1 year later, David and Jessica stood on a stage at the grand ballroom of the Pinnacle Hotel. Over 500 people filled the room: doctors, nurses, philanthropists, families they'd helped, and members of the press. Richard Hoffman stood at the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we celebrate Bright Futures' first full year. In 12 months, this program has provided comprehensive health care to over 2,000 children. But more importantly, it's proved that we can reform healthcare delivery for the most vulnerable among us." Applause filled the room. The architects of this success are Jessica and David Albury. Jessica had the vision and the courage to pursue it. David had the financial acumen to make it sustainable and scalable. Together, they've created something that will outlast all of us, a legacy of compassion and competence. Richard gestured to them. "Please welcome the Alburys to say a few words." Jessica walked to the podium first. David stood beside her, their hands clasped. "Thank you, Richard," Jessica began. "When I first approached Richard Hoffman with this idea, I was terrified. I was a nurse with a dream but no real plan. Richard took a chance on me." She looked out at the audience. "But I need to thank someone else. My husband, David." She turned to him. "A year ago, David and I were in a bad place. I was keeping secrets. He was losing trust. We almost lost each other because I was afraid to share my dream with the person who should have been the first to know about it." David squeezed her hand. "David taught me that partnership means sharing everything, the victories and the vulnerabilities. He joined this mission not because he had to, but because he believed in it. And he believed in me, even when I didn't fully believe in myself." Jessica's voice grew stronger. "Every child we help, every family we support, that's not just my work or David's work or the foundation's work. That's what happens when people choose to work together instead of apart, when they choose honesty over secrets, when they choose courage over fear." The audience stood and applauded. David stepped forward to the microphone. "I'm not much for speeches, but I'll say this. A year ago, I thought my wife was having an affair. I was suspicious, paranoid, and ready to throw away 8 years of marriage. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. But instead of acting on my fear, I followed her. And what I discovered changed everything. Not because she was innocent of wrongdoing, which she was, but because I discovered who my wife really was. Not who I thought she was, or who I wanted her to be, but who she actually was. He looked at Jessica. She was someone with courage I'd never seen, someone with vision I'd never imagined, someone who believed she could change the world, and then actually did it. David addressed the audience again. Bright Futures started because one nurse refused to accept that children should suffer because of economics. It succeeded because she had the courage to pursue that belief, and because she let others, including me, join her in that pursuit. He paused. My message to everyone here is simple. Don't assume you know everything about the people closest to you. Keep discovering them. Keep being surprised by them. Keep choosing to believe in them, even when it's hard. The applause was deafening. After the event, David and Jessica stood on the hotel balcony overlooking the city. The lights stretched to the horizon like stars brought down to earth. Do you remember what you asked me a year ago? Jessica said. About whether I was happy in our marriage? I remember. I am now, she said. Happier than I've ever been. Not just because of the work, but because I finally understand what partnership really means. What does it mean? David asked. It means being brave enough to share your dreams and humble enough to accept help. It means trusting that the person who loves you wants to see you succeed, not fail. It means building something together that neither of you could build alone. David wrapped his arms around her from behind. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe. I still smile every morning, Jessica said. Did you know that? I know. But now I smile for a different reason. Why? Because I'm not carrying my dreams alone anymore. I'm sharing them with you. David kissed the top of her head. Good, because I'm not letting you carry anything alone ever again. They stayed on that balcony until the hotel staff politely suggested they leave so the cleaning crew could finish. As they walked to their car, Jessica's phone buzzed. It's from Richard, she said, reading the message. He wants to meet tomorrow. Says he has a proposal for expanding Bright Futures to 5 new cities. David looked at his wife, this brilliant, courageous woman, who had almost been lost to him because of fear and misunderstanding. What do you think? He asked. Jessica smiled. Not the mysterious smile that had once terrified David, but an open, joyful smile that included him in every part of her happiness. I think we should hear him out, she said. Together. Together, David agreed. They drove home through the quiet city streets. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to help children and families in need. But tonight was theirs, a moment of peace and gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. As they pulled into their driveway, David thought about everything that had happened. The suspicion, the fear, the secrets, the discovery, the reconciliation, the partnership. If someone had told him a year ago that following his wife would lead to this, to meaningful work, to a stronger marriage, to helping thousands of children, he would have thought they were crazy. But life, David had learned, was full of surprises, especially when you stopped assuming you knew everything and started paying attention to what was actually happening. Inside their home, Jessica kicked off her heels and collapsed on the couch. I'm exhausted. David sat beside her. It was a good night. It was a perfect night. Jessica? Thank you for that smile. She looked at him confused. What smile? The one that drove me crazy. The one that made me follow you. The one that changed everything. Jessica laughed. You're welcome. Though I didn't know I was smiling. That's what made it so powerful, David said. It was genuine. It came from somewhere real. Jessica leaned her head on his shoulder. Do you still doubt me, even a little? Never, David said firmly. I know you now, the real you, and I'm never letting that knowledge go. They sat together in the quiet of their home, two people who had almost lost each other but found something better instead. True partnership, honest communication, and shared purpose. The next morning, David woke before Jessica. He made coffee and stood at the bedroom window, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. He heard Jessica moving behind him. She joined him at the window, still in her pajamas, her hair messy from sleep. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning." They stood together, watching the new day begin. Then Jessica grabbed her phone to check her schedule. David watched her face as she scrolled. And there it was, that smile, the one that had started everything. But now David understood. It wasn't a secret smile hiding deception. It was a grateful smile celebrating purpose. It was the smile of someone who had found their calling and was brave enough to pursue it. "What are you smiling about?" Jessica asked, noticing him watching her. "You," David said simply. "Always you." Jessica set down her phone and kissed him. "We should get ready. Richard wants to meet at 8. "Together?" David asked. "Always together," Jessica replied. As they got ready for their day, David realized something profound. The wife who smiled before leaving for work hadn't changed at all. She was still the same woman he'd married 8 years ago. Compassionate, driven, brilliant. He was the one who had changed. He'd learned to see her fully, to trust her completely, to support her unconditionally. And that had made all the difference.